And you can see that once the election had come into a situation where it was shambolic and would deny her legitimacy, she now decided that she must steal the highest vote in Tanzanian history. So she got more votes than Nyerere used to get when he was standing alone during the one party.
Sorry.
Wait, sometimes food they give man joy, but Canadian loud, which is slang for weed, the feeling is different.
And guys, the feeling is different from the bad native. Hello and welcome to the Bad Natives podcast. First of all, before I do anything, like, subscribe, follow. And anyway, what choice do you have? Because this is where the conversations about Africa and our fortunes as a continent happen at the highest level. My name is Robert Kapshenga, the Bad Native from Kampala, where it is absolutely sunny, but the city gets flooded. I'll explain that later. Over to you guys.
Well, hello everyone and welcome. I'm Adesua Giwa Sage. I'm a bad native in Abuja, Nigeria. It's hot. Temperatures are boiling over. But hopefully Trump doesn't strike us anytime soon.
It will get hotter.
Hi, everybody. Great to be back with you. I'm Feril Hafaji in Johannesburg.
And I am Charles Onyango Obo in Nairobi. Pharaoh, you know, we were in a lot of trouble. Your fans were rioting. I told them.
It was getting.
We told them there's a good reason why you are not with us. One of them, I think I can mention it on record, was the loss of your mom. And she was 98, 95. She lived a full, rich life. Our condolences to that, and condolences to the Bad Natives fans. And today I will, do the. We have a message from Dr. David Nekion. He's a doctor at the Aga Khan Hospital in Nairobi. And please, I wanted to encourage you to continue the Bad Natives. It's really good with an exclamation mark. Thank you, David, and people like you are the one who keep us going.
Let me add myself to that, Charles, and just tell you guys two stories. So there is a short online conversation I'm doing on the local Ugandan politics. And the first reaction that came from the public in Uganda was, "We hope you're not leaving the Bad Natives." I said, no, I am here. Then I got another message from now Dr. Paul Amailuk, who is a Ugandan that lives in Australia. And he sent a message saying, the situation in Sudan is so bad. I hope the Bad Natives can talk about it and help us to understand. Now you guys know exactly what we do here. But there is one place that has absolutely shocked every African and people in other parts of the world who know about it. The bloodbath in Tanzania. So just for background, last week, Tanzania went through an election, and one that had made many people extremely angry because the main opposition leader has been away in jail, had been put away by the incumbent. And everything about that election riled a lot of voters, and it exploded into violence. So while that was going on, the internet was switched off. And when the internet was switched on again, we started to get floods of images of violence by the Tanzanian People's Defense Forces, or people in their uniforms, that was meted out on ordinary people. So before we dive into that, Firio, people have missed you, so I have to start with you. So there's no way,
Thank you.
first of all, people need to hear from you. But Firio, you shared a statement from SADC. Now, for those who don't know what SADC is the South African Development Council, or SADC, of which Tanzania is a member. And they had an official observer mission to observe the election in Tanzania. So, SADC seems to have written an 18-page statement on the election. Firio, help us understand, what is SADC saying about the Tanzanian election?
So SADC found, Bob, in its election report that the election, the run up to the election had been relatively smooth, but they found that the conditions for a free and fair election were not met, and therefore they cannot declare, they could not agree with the final outcome of that election as being free and fair. My apologies for that. I'll put it on focus. So SADC found that they couldn't agree that it had been a free and fair election. And in the language of Southern African or SADC diplomacy, it's an unusually harshly worded and critical report.
Because it's interesting, Firio, because Mozambique exploded into a similar orgy of violence. There were protests. And SADC didn't make such a statement. They've never said anything about the situation in Zimbabwe, and neither have they said much about what has happened in Madagascar. So, what is the significance of this for Tanzania's, first of all, status as a country, as a member of SADC, but also really for the legitimacy and effectiveness of Samia Suluhu as the president, as someone who has now assumed the presidency? What does that mean? How do they deal with her now?
So I think that the reason that this was a different one was because of the jailing of the official opposition leader. So they obviously couldn't look away as they usually do on these elections. But it does seem to me, and you guys will know this better than I do, that President Samia Suluhu Hassan seems to be going ahead, no matter the global critique, no matter the numbers of people who have been killed in the post-election violence, that she's become one of those leaders who is not really going to be take into consideration even the SADC report. Obviously, we now wait and see. So, what is SADC going to do? Is it going to expel Tanzania? Is it going to ramp up its criticism, or is it just going to let things be?
Let me just switch it over to you, Adesua, and I just want to get like a regional perspective, regional in the sense that when a regional body rejects a political development, what they do, because you remember what happened. ECOWAS has a lot of experience on these issues. If you recall, the stand they took on the military regimes in the Sahel. But I remember fondly the way they handled Yahya Jammeh actually twice. The way they handled Yahya Jammeh in the Gambia, and also how they extracted Charles Taylor out of Liberia. What can regional bodies like SADC do where clearly, and even they themselves say this is the position, beyond issuing such a statement? What lessons do you think West Africa can offer us?
Well, so before we actually get to ECOWAS, the chairman of SADC, was that not the Madagascan president that's now in exile?
Most likely. The
Yeah.
current so the current chair of SADC is Madagascar. Let's just
Mhm. Yeah.
how
And
ironic.
and and the president gets stripped of his citizenship while and his position and exiled.
Wow.
And so even when SADC is releasing this report, they're doing this under under this very unique situation.
Mm-hmm.
ECOWAS has been, you know, ECOWAS has not responded at all, actually, to the US threatening boots on the ground or to strike Nigeria. And I think that would maybe let you know how much they have lost their metal or their voice when it comes to situations in West Africa. Now, when it comes to elections, I think elections are very different than when it comes to coups, and also that when ECOWAS responded to the coup, particularly in Niger, obviously that in Mali had preceded the coup in Niger, but it now seemed that it was a trend because we then had, we were getting multiple coups, and Niger's was the last one. But the response and the strong immediate response from the moment it came out, I was actually with a friend who works in international relations, and
Mm.
he started banging his head like that. He said, "Oh God, the Tinubu boys have done it again. They even put themselves on the wrong stationery. Like the response was too quick. It was not well thought out.
Yeah.
They immediately took this very strong stance of "I'm pro-democracy. This cannot stand," and then they had to, and then so every because you have to remember that Tinubu was the chairman of ECOWAS at that point. And there was just this feeling of the response was not well thought out.
Mm-hmm.
It was a harsher response when it came to Niger than what had happened with Mali, right? And that is kind of what kicked off everything that then happened, because I think they felt then they didn't want to self correct,
Mm.
uh, and they had to keep that same energy going the whole way through, and it kind of just escalated. And then we now have three states pulling out and the alliance of the Sahel states. So, a lot of people blamed Tinubu's closeness, his particular personal closeness with France, um, that as one of the motivations for this. So, I'm not sure if SADC has many lessons to learn from ECOWAS, because I do think that we have lived with a certain type of hypocrisy. ECOWAS is not going to say much, a lot of negative things about elections in Cameroon, in Nigeria. They're kind of going to let it fly. They're not going to release any harshly worded letter. And so I think as Africans, we must think about not just our regional bodies like SADC and ECOWAS, but also the AU and perhaps their toothlessness, because it's kind of like a cacophony of hypocrites.
Okay. So, Charles, uh, there are two things that I would, whatever you say, there are two things you must address. Uh, the way Tanzania and the political establishment in Tanzania behaved, especially towards their fellow Africans who'd come to observe this election. Normally, countries that abuse elections tend to court the African observers and break them away from the Western countries. So, what happened in Tanzania? Something was different.
Yeah, okay. Bob, there are ways in which this was a strange one because let us begin with okay, wait, Pharaoh has spoken of the Sadak statement, but
Mm.
one of the more interesting one is the ANC statement, the African
Mhm.
National Congress.
Mm.
The African National
Uh-huh.
Congress was invited as a comradely party.
Mm.
Yes.
So you would have expected that, Suluhu and the CCM would do everything to make it possible for them to observe the election. But in their statement, they say that on the day of the vote, they were totally
Mhm.
shut down, totally,
Wow.
and not allowed to see anything.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah? It's really incredible. And
It's
this is the ANC for Christ's sake.
they've been these
ANC
guys
and
have been CCM and ANC, Charles.
eh?
For perspective, CCM and ANC have been together since the early 70s.
Uh, Bob, even the 60s.
Yes.
So, so they shut down the ANC, and then, of course, Tanzania is both a member of SADC but also a member of the East African Community.
Yeah.
And the East African Community Mission was in such a disarray. They were running for the hills and the rivers. Yeah? So, so there is talk.
What do you mean? What do you mean they were running
They,
for the hills and the rivers?
they ran away physically in the chaos. And
Wow.
reports talk of the Tanzanian High Commission was going in the slums and the back streets, picking up.
Tanzania or Kenyan?
Sorry, the Kenyan High Commissioner in Tanzania, picking up these guys and making a dash for the for the airport, dodging tear gas cans. So it was very dramatic. And why, you asked earlier, why is this the case? Because there is a kind of a Tanzanian consensus and a CM consensus, and one of them had been that Tanzania would, while it would be hard on the on the opposition, it would have internal democracy.
Yes.
So Suluhu has taken that away. She
Yeah.
didn't allow even the pretense of an internal democratic election. Usually you have your candidate, the big one, and then you put 2-3 other candidates whom she or he can defeat. She didn't even allow that.
Yeah.
But also, I think that there had always been a code about violence and how it is deployed. And I think it was thou shalt not kill.
Yes.
Yeah, that is why you see in a country which has been going to the elections, as long as it has, apart from 2000 when there was a fracas in Zanzibar, Tanzania had never had elections where people are killed, and it has never had an election where, as Freero noted, the key opposition leader is locked away. That for particularly the old EAC, East African Community, that is so unlike it. The tradition, not just in Tanzania but in East Africa community, particularly the regional members, had always been that you allow the main candidates to run, and then you steal the vote. but she 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 excluded the main candidates, and then she stole the vote, and it seems that she wanted, and you can see that once the election had come into a situation where it was shambolic and to deny her legitimacy, she now decided that she must steal the highest vote in Tanzanian history. So she got more votes than Nyerere used to get when he was standing alone during the one party.
Sorry.
But oh my, we need a moment to laugh about that, because it is the only way you can remain sane in these kinds of situations. But I also, Charles, I wanted to give a bit of perspective so that we understand the gravity of this situation. Now, this might seem like a small matter, and I'm yet to confirm that it's true. So she was actually sworn in at a military base. Is that correct?
No. At State House.
Okay.
Yeah, initially they had said it would be at a military base.
Yeah. But what's interesting is that in the last 20 or so years, you can say even 25 years, the East African, even African tradition has been ceremonial swearing in, like festivals where, heads of states are invited from other countries to come and be a part, and you have these convoys, and it's like a jamboree where the victor then drives into the national stadium with a lot of ceremony. The most colorful one being Denis Sassou Nguesso of Congo, who arrives with these commando looking, I can't remember what his unit was. I don't know whether his unit was the Cobras or the Ninjas. And they're in all forms of, military theater. They look like devils. But, I would wonder how they would look if Trump came with just one jet. But you see, so you have these menacing looking guys walking through. So you have that ceremonial element. And I think for Adesuwa, I think Tinubu also did it with his 55 vehicle convoy and all of that stuff. But so for her, remember, this is her first election as the candidate.
Yeah.
Now, for her to not have that kind of ceremony, for me, said a lot about the complete loss of legitimacy. So she's almost a hostage now of her office and where she is. One wonders how she plans to move forward. But just to give you guys another perspective of how this is a significant development in the political history of Tanzania, you see, one of the Tanzanian People's Defense Force cardinal principles and point of national pride is they position themselves as a people's army. In fact, they were the first military in this region to refer to themselves as Tanzanian People's Defense Forces. They are supposed to be, and Nyerere is the one who came up with this notion of a politicized army that serves the population, that's built within the population and anchors itself in the community. But what we saw, or at least what I saw on the streets, is a break by the Tanzanian military with that tradition. And that I think is perhaps the worst damage that has happened to Tanzania. That one of its anchor institutions, which drew its legitimacy and anchored itself in the population, turned the guns on the Tanzanian people. Part of the training in the Tanzanian army is they tell soldiers that the gun is an asset of the people of Tanzania and is supposed to protect them from any threats. So I think that whoever made the decision to unleash that level of violence using guns on Tanzanian people, that price, in my opinion, is going to be extremely, extremely high. I think Tanzania has broken, and everything that happens from now on will be that this is the point at which Tanzania took the wrong road. I don't know or see how you come back from that kind of Furio, you're from the, excuse my phrase, you're from the violent tradition of protest. I mean, you came of age at a time when the state in South Africa was
I did. I did.
extremely brutal. They were killing people, just shooting at unarmed protesters, kids, workers, massacring. How does a country uh, walk back or from that precipice? What do you think? How do the Tanzan? How do you see? Not think. How do you see the Tanzanian political process moving forward in these circumstances where the armed forces have been unleashed on the voters and the voters had extreme anger? I mean, you have the experience of South Africa, but you also saw what happened with Mugabe in during the days of Morgan Changirai.
Yes, of course. So Bob, last year I went to Dar and I was so deeply impressed by what I was seeing. It was clearly growing from my last visit there. It had expanded. It was looking prosperous. It really was, for me, it was like, wow, this place is happening, man. Even though I'd been reading what had been happening with President Samia, and I knew what had happened to Tundu Lissu as well. I have to say, if South Africa is an example, and also more contemporary examples Madagascar, Nepal, the Gen Z protests not only on our continent but in the world, Bangladesh as well. And if you look at the anger of those young people on the streets, I certainly don't think that this is the end of the story, that she's just going to be able to battle her way through this. So Bob, for me, I don't see that this is the end of the story. I was watching last night where the government's trying to put out the line that everything's back to normal, your internet is back on, and let's just go ahead. I don't think it's going to be so easy in this case.
Charles, one of the issues that has come up is that apart from Tundu Lissu, the opposition leader, being locked up, one of the stories I'm hearing is that there was actually a schism within CCM, a major one, with the group that had been associated with the former president Magufuli being part of, the protest and opposition to the way things were going. You are an East African in every sense of the word. How do you see this playing out in terms of the political resolution? First of all, within CCM, how do you see CCM? How long do you think these guys can survive after this? Is it something that can be easily glossed over? I mean, Furio is already saying it can't.
No, and Bob. So I mean, you have correctly told that she is what Samia has done is that she's probably the first leader who has, in a very significant way, divided the party, and not just the party but the military. Because you'll have seen this video of this captain who made some scathing criticism of the state of politics in Tanzania and Samia's leadership. Now, a lot of people thought that that captain must be doing this from outside Tanzania, but no, he did that from inside Tanzania, and it is our understanding that the army has said we will discipline him. You can't touch him. So that guy
Wow.
is still in Tanzania. So it shows you that there is a schism there. But the other thing which is really troubling is that there is a sense in which people are feeling that Samia is breaking the union, that she has emboldened the Zanzibaris, secessionists, and that is crossing the Rubicon. So
Yeah.
it's to have done something where that issue now becomes to the fore again. It is just not dividing the party, but she's probably set the country on a course in which Tanzania itself, as we have known it since 1964, could be under threat. And the question is, how will it be resolved? I think that it could easily be resolved by some people deciding that she should be kicked out.
I think for me, I would just say that what happened in Tanzania, we were not expecting it in Tanzania. We were expecting it in other parts of East Africa, and I shall not go into details of the likely candidates. So I have to turn to Adesua on this one. What do you think because one of the things that was so obvious was there was a lot of collaboration between a lot of young people in the three East African countries. I call them three because it was mainly activists in Uganda, activists in Kenya. In fact, Samia herself, in her speech, claimed that the protesters were foreigners. I don't know how they got in because we know Tanzania is very controlled. First of all, that effect in terms of building solidarity amongst the activist community on the continent. But what would be the lessons that people who may want to protest angrily and violently to fight back against the system, what are the immediate lessons that go out to people or young people particularly who want to take on activism as a way of bringing about change?
So, activism is, you know, I find this question very hard to answer. But no, for different reasons. I
Yeah.
remember because my thesis when I was at university was about comparative history, and it's comparing the civil rights movement to the anti-apartheid movement.
Mhm.
And I was focusing mostly on the guerrilla camps that you had in neighboring countries in Southern Africa, the ANC camps, and also how a little bit of how they run those camps and the different groups kind of mirror the issues you have in those camps mirror the issues you have in South African society today. Um, and so for me, it was a very interesting exercise. But at the same time, the civil rights movement and the efficacy of nonviolence, of the nonviolent movement, and Martin Luther King Jr., it was over exaggerated because they want people to not be violent. So the people who wrote the history made sure to write that the non-violent methods were the most effective methods. But if we look at the non-violent methods, they were very violent to the black people who were there. If you look at the sit-ins, right, in the restaurants, and like this is a peaceful protest, they're just sitting in. They are non-violent in their response, but they are pouring hot, boiling hot of coffee on these people. They're scalding these people. They're beating these people. They're lynching these people. It is violent, but the non-violence is in their reaction, which by not reacting to the violence highlights the violence of the oppressor. Right. And I think part of what made those things effective is you see them hosing down children, beating, setting dogs on children in peaceful marches. But what it does is it emphasizes the violence of the oppressor.
Mhm.
But at those levels, we saw those images, and some of those images moved people. But really, what moved the government forward was the fear of of Malcolm X and the other movements. MLK became the person you could speak to because the Israelis were on the other side. And that's what it's true. Even if we look at the ANC and we look at Mkhonto Wesizwe, the first one, MK, the first MK, it was the fear of the violence that made it say, let's speak to the non-violent. And so for me, I'm not a proponent of violence at all, but I also do not know how to tell people who, if we look at those movements in the 60s, independence movements, and the civil rights movements in America, you see that there was a lot of violence put upon people. But I think that loss of life and the lethalness of it was just not as severe as we're seeing today when it is your own state perpetrating this violence. Because then it seems that there is no arbitrage. I don't know how to explain this, but there's no referee in this fight. If the Nigerian government comes and they have done this right in and opens fire on people and kills people, and it is live streamed and nothing happens, nothing changes. Nothing, there is no come to Jesus moment, then how do I express to the people of Tanzania and Kenya that it's worth still going out there and getting shot? We've seen that it's worked in other places, that there is a breaking point. There is a breaking point. But I can't, in good conscience, tell people that that breaking point is worth your own life and your own blood and the blood of your brothers and sisters. Because another very frustrating aspect is that after that breaking point comes, we've seen what happened with the Arab Spring, and we've seen what's happening in countries now, is that they just get a new autocratic leader. And it's not entirely sure that what has propelled young people to take to the streets and to ask for change, it's not entirely sure that they win at the end of the day. It's as though those in leadership, the political elite or the military, are playing musical chairs upstairs, and they're using the lives and the blood of young people to get those seats. So I actually I'm not necessary, because so I'm not, you know I don't have any answers when it comes to this, because I don't actually I'm not entirely sure what we are learning from history, and I'm not entirely sure what we're seeing right now. But I am seeing that there is something that is breaking in people, and I hope it's not the psyche of people, because our systems are not necessarily working, but I'm not sure that we have figured out a way to get them to a place where they work.
So I just want to follow on Furio from what Adesua has been saying.
Mm.
And she made an interesting reference to MLK, that's Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X. And I think the issue that arises there is one of leadership. That, yes, you have these violent contestations, but there is a recognized leadership with whom you can have some discussion about how to resolve these things. Now, a very interesting reaction I saw was when the AU issued a statement. The AU chairperson issued a statement congratulating Samia on her victory. And the social media streets just went completely berserk. I mean, they just ripped him up to pieces. I mean, the reactions were, I mean, insolence is even polite. I mean, they just basically they accused the AU of treachery and its leadership.
Mm.
How do we get back the types of leaders that were on the continent that could resolve excuse me, some of the things that, like, for instance, the latest violence, the one like 2008 in Kenya, that shocked everybody, that Kenya could descend to that level. You had leaders from the continent coming down and saying no. And by the way, interestingly, the guys who resolved that issue were West Africans. So you had Obasanjo coming in, you had Kofi Annan coming in, and Tanzanians. Benjamin Mkapa came in, and so did Kikwete. So who bears the leadership cap in Africa? Who confronts that issue as it? And what are the kinds of leaders that we need in a context of this nature? Because as Sadek has written, it can't be that somehow the people who did this in Tanzania just get away with it and we move on as if people didn't die and
I
African
don't,
lives don't.
I just see that that's not going to happen any longer. And where you start to get clear to me is back in the day, if the then OAU head congratulates the leader of a clearly rigged election, there was almost no recourse for people's voices to be heard. The social media age completely changes that game, which is why the first thing that tyrants do these days is they switch off the internet. And I'd love to know which company is dominant in Tanzania, which that did so, because every time this happens, MTN
Everyone,
is one of the companies that switches off as soon as the regulator tells it to do so, or the government tells it to do so. So I think this time, if we go back to your first question of South Africa's example, once these young people begin to organize themselves into branches, districts, regions, and develop campaigns of action, it is unstoppable, because that was the lesson from South Africa in the 70s and the 80s. These were young people just planning waves and waves of protest, where old fashioned tyrants or autocrats, I don't think they can survive in this era. And I'm not sure who's going to be our elders who step in now. But what interests me is this young generation, their rage. If you look at Boniface, if you look at the
yeah.
links being made, solidarity links across countries, I don't think that the old responses are going to be able to be sustained for any length of time.
Mm.
Charles, you were in Nairobi 2008. You are the unique East African who has watched how violent political reaction in shall I say the three East African countries, the original East African countries, because that has happened in all the three of them. This culture, how does it end, and where does it leave both the president of Uganda, Museveni, and Ruto of Kenya, who have congratulated Suluhu on her victory, and both of them face a precarious political way forward.
Well, you see, the thing is, it's what in Kenya in 2008, what made it possible for a resolution is the Kenyan political society is very open. So, so it was possible for that kind of input from Kwete, Jakaya, from Kofi Annan and Obasanjo. And but one of the things we see about Tanzania and then in Kenya had a very strong civil society. I don't mean civil society in activists. They are just, for example, the Chamber of Commerce, the private sector association, and those provide the buffer, and in fact they were very very important in making sure that there was space for players to input. The thing, and that's where the difference is between Samia and, for example, Uganda. Museveni is actually an enlightened despot. he's, he's, he's there is a lot of civic space, for business associations. He has these elders or something, so there is really a lot of opportunity to input. I think that where Tanzania is different is that it doesn't seem to have that. What they face is, as Pharaoh said, it is true as Adesua said, that we saw that the Arab Spring ended in vain. A lot of these things end in vain. But if South Africa teaches you anything, that's just the first phase. I mean, when were the Soweto massacres? They were in the 70s. It
Yes.
took
76.
Yeah, it
76.
took how many years more? So I think that you can
14
kill
years.
them, do these things, but we will continue to have waves and waves. And the first wave
I
never
appreciate
succeeds.
that.
The
I
first
appreciate
wave
that.
never succeeds. It is usually the third, fourth, sixth phase which finds success. So it
The
is,
change is inevitable.
yeah. So it's just going to roll on and on. So the only thing that people like Samia can do is they can postpone the moment of reckoning, but they can never bury it.
Because it will come. So
Yeah.
one of the things I want to go to is very quickly is Adesua, you talked about the state turning on its own people. Now, this is not a recent phenomenon. This is something that's characteristically modern Africa. And one of the effects has been undermining the institutional ability of Africa to exist on its own feet and take a stand in international affairs. And so now, uh, Trump has decided, after watching a documentary on Fox News, that Christians in Nigeria, Christians are being killed.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so he's ordered the US Army to prepare an intervention. Please tell us about that. What's going on?
Okay, so let me start from the top. Well,
Yeah,
I'll try and make it as short and concise as possible.
yeah,
Nigeria has a huge insecurity crisis,
yeah.
and we have seen it develop into something that is absolutely unsustainable. Thousands of Nigerians are being killed every single year. First, a lot of people are focusing on Boko Haram, but Boko Haram is actually not who is mostly killing the Christians in the Middle Belt or the North Central region. And Nigeria's
Mm.
North Central region, it's called the North Central. For some people, they call it the Middle Belt. It's essentially where the mostly Christian South and the mostly Muslim North meet. but also very importantly, it is the most it's the food basket of the nation. It has the best land. It has a lot of resources also when it comes to mineral resources. And so it's also always been historically a frontier for land grabbing and fighting. And this is predates even the British getting here. If you look at Nigeria's history, this is a long time of these tribal tensions. These were
Mhm.
tribal tensions before religion came, and then religion came, and perhaps some of them took religious elements to them. But fundamentally, we have a resource crisis. We have desertification in the north, and we also have, because of insecurity in the Sahel, large populations of Fulanis from other regions coming into Nigeria. When I interviewed the governor of Plateau State, a state that has to deal with this, he said to me that they told us that these people are Fulani people, but as a northerner, when you hear another northerner speak Hausa, you know what part of the north they come from, whether the
Mhm.
dialect or the accent. And he said, these people don't speak Hausa. They're not us. They're not our Fulanis. And so when we're talking about what is going on in Nigeria right now, we have porous borders, and we have a fight for resource control. And a lot of the governors, a lot of people in security systems are saying that it is not just killing of Christians; they are trying to land grab. They are pushing people off their lands. And the massacre we saw in Benue State in Neowata was IDPs, those internally displaced people who had come from somewhere else. And so that additional pressure on the land is why you then see these type of massacres take place. At the same time, we still have Islamic extremist terrorists like Boko Haram, like ISWAP, like JNIM, like Mahmuda. And if you're like, wow, all these different groups, yes. Boko Haram splinter groups that are Al Qaeda linked, and now ISIS splinter groups that are IS linked are now all in Nigeria. And because we have such large ungoverned spaces and forgotten people, we are having these murders on large scales. So, yes, people say that more Muslims are dying because the north is predominantly Muslim, and that's absolutely true. People are saying that some Christians are being targeted because they are Christian. That is absolutely true. That is in the minority what is happening, but those visuals that you're seeing are absolutely true. I read a piece by El Nathan John, who's a very brilliant Nigerian writer, and one line that stuck with me is that he said, Christians, like Nigerians, are not killing Nigerians because they hate each other. People are dying because the Nigerian government does not love anybody. They do not love anybody, not the Christian, not the Muslim, not the herder, not the farmer. They do not love anybody. Our government does not love anybody. And they have actually, it's a pretense of a government. It is a pretense when you go down to the governor level. They have large swaths of land within their territories that they don't control.
So, Furio,
Trump has seen the videos, and now he has said that he wants to put boots on the ground or to
yeah.
bomb us. And that is the situation. That's where we are today.
So, Furio, your friend, Mr. Trump, his immediate
Sure.
solution.
So now you are in the crosshairs, eh?
Yeah. So the question is, why
After we
has he?
spent the year in the crosshairs, it's funny though. Like Larry Madow was noticing, I don't think Donald Trump has opened up to Nigerian Christian refugees, right? In the way he did to our
African.
white genocide victims.
I know, but you see, the more serious question I want to ask is, Furio, what do you think he is doing?
That's like base racism. Eh?
So here's another, Furio, here's another point. So first of all, he cancelled Wole Soyinka's visa, who, well, Wole is not particularly Christian, but
No.
but you see, and let me just sort of switch over to another part of the world. Maduro in Venezuela has ordered the army to distribute rifles to everybody in the country in preparation for a US invasion. So What is Trump distracting from? And how come his attention span on South Africa seems to have? I mean, you may not want to remind him, but so suddenly now it's Nigeria. Why? Someone was saying it could be because of the resources. This is just uh, a ruse, but actually they have a much deeper agenda for Nigeria than just the Christian excuse. What do you say to that?
So, I mean, over here, there was lobbying, etc. And how, I mean, it's taken a full year for South Africa to get itself out of the firing line of Donald Trump. The vice president, JD Vance, will come to the G20, Adesua, which you and I will be covering. And so, how that was done, Bob, is really intricate
Mm,
footwork. Is that you have to open your markets to American poultry and to blueberry poultry and pork are the two big trade trade routes that we've opened to US producers, and then possibly also an LNG gas deal for American businesses, and then whatever critical minerals we have agreements to export those. So that's taken a full year,
mm.
and we're still under the cosh of those tariffs. I think that's what Nigeria is heading to in if it's going to negotiate this position with the US at all, because
Yeah.
underneath it, there's almost always a commercial interest at play.
Oh, I forgot
Charles?
to add this, Bob. Can I come in here
Yeah,
quickly?
go ahead, Adisua.
Uh, just before Charles comes in, there's a key security interest at play here because in 2024, when Niger kicked out France, they also kicked out America, and America lost their only significant base in West
Ah,
Africa. They had a significant air base in Niger that they spent at least $250 million on, that they have now been kicked out of. They've left around September of 2024. The announcement was made in the early, I think like May 2024. It took a couple of months, and America completely pulled out. So they lost their base in West Africa. And so when we consider the spread of JNIM in Mali, surrounding Bamako, they say JNIM has made it all the way down to the Kanji forest here in Nigeria. That is Al Qaeda. That is a huge problem for America. So yes, I do think there might be some resource plays here when it comes to our minerals or something, but I think there's a huge security aspect here that
Mm,
I think
mm.
America's closest base to West Africa is in Djibouti. So, they've lost a significant foothold in sub-Saharan Africa, and I think they want it back. And I think that might be some of the pressure we're seeing.
Charles, I know what I'm going to ask you about. You would have preferred to preserve it for the end, but it is too sweet a story out of the US for us to leave it for you to have it as your event. So you start it, we all discuss it, and then we go. So, Charles, what's the best
Well,
African news out of the US?
it's a story which was one time one of Pharaoh's parting shots. So Zoran Mamdani has done it.
Ah, yes.
yes,
Uh, eh, he has become the first uh, what you can say African born, I don't know, the first Muslim, the first social democrat, socialist to take New York, the greatest city on earth. So it is,
Mm.
but here's the thing, and I think that there are people like California Governor Gavin Newsom and Bernie Sanders who are really credited with, because the Democratic Party establishment, people like Schumer didn't stick with him. They only started making good noises. Even Obama only just called him last week. I think the older Democratic Party establishment also felt threatened by this leftward drift. But I
Mm.
Mm,
think that they have read correctly, like Bernie Sanders has said, that this is actually the path. That if the Democratic Party is to win, it needs to be less shy about taking this radical position, and that it took, you know, an African, Asian, American like Zoran Mamdani to do it, I think he's been in a good place. He has been able to make history.
Adesua.
And then my okay.
Wait, Firio, we won't let you go yet. We just want to
Sorry.
hear everyone's perspective on Zoran before we do the parting shots. So first, Adesua.
You know, Zoran is 34. I that's giving me
Yeah.
2 years to become president of Nigeria.
Exactly. I can't wait for you.
Do you know
I
Adesua? Do you know how we would say it
yeah.
here locally in Uganda? That this boy
Uh,
was born when we were seeing. That's how we say it. He was born here when we were seeing, you know.
yeah. No, I
Yeah.
think what he has done is impressive, but I think what he's done is impressive. I think, we've also seen what the Gaza conflict has done to American politics. We're seeing a post-Trump era. We have to look at what has happened also across America, because Democrats picked up important seats in New Jersey, in Virginia. Proposition 50 is on the ballot in California. We're seeing an anti-Trump movement
It
kind
has
of
passed.
garner some
Proposition 50 has passed.
proposition 50 is
Really?
fantastic. So
Yeah.
fantastic, and that is going to have that's going to affect the next elections with their house there in America. So I think, when we're thinking about Zoran, he is inspiring as a young person. I I don't envy him because he's coming in with a lot of pressure, a lot of strong opponents, and a lot of high expectations, and that's a very difficult place to be in. But I really wish him the best. I think what he's done is very inspirational. It does show us also the value of trying to be authentic and speaking straight. I think too many politicians in America, particularly on the left, have been playing it careful for too long. They don't want to misspeak, they don't want to misstep, they don't want to be cancelled because their bases are sensitive. And Zoran kind of set that aside and just went gung ho, and he won. And I think kudos to him. And also nice to beat Como. I'm so happy to see him get beat. Like, honestly, like, he didn't know when to quit. He didn't know when to quit. So
He looked so
yeah.
pathetic yesterday trying to deny that Trump was his supporter. And he was saying
Exactly.
that Trump was just opposed to Mamdani. You know
To
they don't like
Zoran,
to
yeah.
pronounce his name, so that he's just opposed to Zoran. He's not my support. I mean, really. Anyway, over to you, Firio.
It's not
Really?
that hard to say. What would they say with Yuval Sage or Yanko Obo?
Ah, my Kapshenga.
Funny.
All right.
We're having good fun with this today, as we should. I love that he jumped into the Hudson with his suit on and came out saying that he would be freezing rentals. So it's been a brilliant tactical campaign for young people.
Yeah.
My parting shot is setting us up for next week. I want to download his dad's book, Mahmoud Mamdani's book, on the Ugandan
poison.
president, and I hope we can. Yes, I want to just download that and hope we can discuss it soon.
Actually, I think on that note, between me and Charles, we'll try and see if we can get him on the Bad Natives to actually discuss that
That
book.
would be excellent.
Yeah,
I
because
would love that. Would be fabulous.
it's a
I'm
fantastic
currently
read.
finishing Howard French. Really, I'm just finishing Howard French's book, The Second Emancipation, about Nkrumah and that era. Honestly, another fantastic book and someone we should have on the Bad
I'm gonna
Natives.
read it.
My parting shot is for Dangote.
Mm-hmm.
I sent Charles a letter recently that someone had written. It's a series and it's titled Nigerian Food, FOOD. Let me just tell you what food stands for, because
Mm-hmm.
Dangote is the king of food. Food
Mm-hmm.
is a framework of opportunity, oligopoly, and distortion. Right. Recently, yeah. The
Only
Nigerian
Nigerians can
government
come up with stuff like that.
Oh, yes. Recently, the Nigerian government announced that there will be a 15% tariff put on the importation of diesel and petrol to ensure cost recovery for local refineries. Now, they try and pretend that those modular refineries are refineries. This is for Dangote. This is cost recovery for Dangote Refinery. Dangote Refinery that got land at the discount, that got dollar at a discounted exchange rate, that got a fund from NMPCL at a discounted exchange from 7.5% for the refinery. Dangote that has gotten every help along the way in his business said he's still not making enough profit, and so they are going to put a 15% tariff on importation, which would increase the pump price for every Nigerian to about, analysts put it at 150 naira per liter. The headline today says Nigerians to pay 1 trillion naira extra for petrol yearly. Now, if you would think, oh, that's a lot, that's going to increase inflation. Yes, that's going to essentially be a transfer of wealth from the poorest Nigerians to the richest man in Africa. Yes. But the best part about this headline is that in preparation for this news to go out, Femi Otedola, who also has interest in Dangote Refinery, had sent out an advertisement to be on the front page of multiple newspapers. So on top of this major headline, I'll send you guys a picture, is a tiny headline. Femi Otedola says Tinubu's 15% import tariff marks bold step towards $1 trillion economy. So, and right under they say Nigerians to pay 1 trillion extra. So where's the money coming from?
Okay, okay.
I love it.
Look, guys. Let me do mine, and then Charles, as always, the tradition. Charles winds it up. Again, for me, as always, it comes from my new life of running. So,
Running.
two interesting things. Today is the 5th. Yes, on the 3rd, which is, I'm trying to remember the sequence of days, but anyway, about a day or so ago, the comrades guys opened the subscription for the application for guys to run comrades in 2027. Guys, I kid you
27 or
not.
26?
Oh, sorry, 26. The next year. Okay? I kid you not, guys. In 10 hours, it was closed. 10 hours.
What?
22,000 people signed up and paid 500 rand because that's the subscription fee. Paid, closed, 10 hours, finished.
Wow.
No more conversation. Done. By the time I got back from town to try and go on and see if I was still interested, they made the decision for me. So I am not coming, Furio. It's done. It's finished.
No.
It finished. So, but the best one for me, Charles, was watching the New York Marathon. I think for me, the female athletes this year have just been phenomenal. It's amazing what Helen Obiri from Kenya, in the last 2 kilometers, the woman was running like she had just started. She sprinted to the end and broke a long time course record for the New York Marathon. But I think really for us in the in the running world, the exemplars have been the female runners, whether it's Tigist Sefa of Ethiopia, Lakeda, who won the Boston one, Jeff Kirui, who took the Chicago one, then Shifan Hassan in Sydney in style, and finally Helen Obiri. I mean, really, it's whatever our issues on the African continent, there are still these people who somehow manage. And Charles, it reinforces the growing political view that the spaces that African states neglect and have no interest in are the spaces where Africans thrive. Running
Yes.
is one of them.
Yep.
Over to you, Charles.
Well, well, Bob, mine was, as you know, I am into museums and curation and all that. So on yesterday, actually, the Grand Egyptian Museum
Oh.
finally opened formally. It is the largest museum in the world dedicated to a single civilization, 490,000 square meters. So it's I really look forward to visiting. And but there was also Paul McCartney, the great musician, former Beatle. He released an oral history called Wings, and
Wow.
he talks there about a trip that he made to Nigeria in 1973. He was mugged on the streets and all of these things, and then he went. He had a confrontation with Fela Kuti, and then they became close friends. So Fela Kuti invited him and his friends to his palace, and he says
Kalakuta
he
Republic.
gave him the strongest weed he has ever smoked, and and he had a light head for a week or so.
I love it.
I love
I
that.
mean,
I have a song lyric for you. I have a
Guys.
song lyric to take us out, take us home.
Yeah,
Sing
you
it,
do
sing
it.
it, sing it.
There's a very
yeah,
popular song. It goes, sometimes food no they give man sometimes food they give man joy, but Canadian loud, which is slang for weed, the feeling is different.
And guys, the feeling is different from the bad natives. Follow, subscribe, and then of course keep listening and watching. Thank you very much from us.
Thank you.
Bye guys.
yeah.